Hello and welcome to another edition of Cracking the Cryptic, and what I'm doing again today is having a look at my solve of 3 times crossword puzzles in a row. As I mentioned a couple of videos ago, I was in Bangalore for the World Sudoku Championships recently. I did promise to say where I'd finished and failed to do that, so I'll just let you know that I finished 32nd in the world. One of our British competitors finished 19th, David McNeil, also a well-known crossword solver, and he managed to pit me for the best over 50, so congratulations to him. And good news that Britain had number 1 and 2 in the world in one category at least. And Tom Collier was also ahead of me in, I think, 30th place, so pretty good showing. People always ask me how many people is that out of, and the answer they're expecting is just over 200 who turn up and take part in the World Sudoku Championship, but I like to reckon that it's out of about 7 billion, since anyone in the world can do Sudoku, and most people have at some point, but that may be a little hubristic. So, because I only had yesterday's and today's that I hadn't done, I went back to last week, Tuesday last week, and that's what we're seeing here. So if you are keeping up with the series, and if you did solve that, you may be struggling to remember some of this stuff. But here's an interesting one. 14 across, medical man with drill causing misery. That was making me think bore with something O, something E to fit in the misery, but then that didn't really answer any wordplay questions. So the medical man, you have to remember that one of the possible medical men, as well as DR for doctor, MD, and MB, I think, is fairly common, or used to be. MO for medical officer, bit of an army one, is useful. The drill in that case was PE for physical exercise that you may be drilled in, and that gave mope being a misery. I guess that's in the sense of someone who is a mope is a misery. That was pretty tough. And here we have 16 down, fairly straightforward this one. Cleverly sculpted statue likely to be hollow. So we take an anagram of statue, which is astute. If we make the word likely hollow, i.e. we just take the outsides of it, we get ly, and astutely means cleverly. That was quite hard. 19 down. Hard clue and a hard answer in its own right. Opening cold beer, expose rabble. And I mean, it's a very neatly worded clue, but what you have to understand to solve that is cold is C, as so often, and beer is ale, as so often, but it's very hard to see where that would fit in with C blank N in the grid. And what you have to do is open that up and put in a word for expose, which in this case is nail. And the answer is canaille, I think it's pronounced, which is a French word for kind of the lower classes, I think, the rabble, canaille, which certainly didn't occur to me immediately. It's lucky for me that I know the word, so that once I've got all the checking letters, I can see that that possibility is there. Even nail as expose, if you nail a lie, you expose it, is an unusual bit of synonymy. Linotype at 15 down, that was pretty hard. Retired printer was the definition, and there was some quite well disguised anagrammatic wordplay. But retired printer, it's a machine that used to do printing. They don't use it anymore, is the implication of the clue. And again, that was pretty difficult. 27 across, a little more extreme general knowledge in a way. Cynic, one involved in swindle, means to inherit. Well, the wordplay there isn't impossible, but it's not easy. You put one I in swindle, which is to do, D-O, so you've got dio. And then the means to inherit are biological means, they're genes. And that gives you Diogenes, who was a Greek philosopher who was grouped with the cynics, which is not quite the meaning of cynic one's expecting there. I dare say he was a little cynical, but probably not as much as the word now implies. So just under 5 minutes for last Tuesday. I was quite pleased with that. As we've noted there was a bit of general knowledge that you really did need to have, and some of the wordplay wasn't straightforward at all. So any time under 5 minutes is going to be all right. But that wasn't a puzzle where I would certainly always expect to come in under 5 minutes. So this is yesterday, Monday, it's 26863, and hard to get started. I did manage to work out on 3 down that there was an anagram of begun Roger without the O. It's another printer, which in this case is Gutenberg, the man who invented the printing press, or is generally credited with it anyway. So that gave me a bit of a start. Devices for measuring radioactive element in green fruit. That's gauges, which is putting uranium in gauges. They're more familiar as green gauges, I suppose, but it's a bit odd to put a letter in a word and get another word that sounds exactly the same. I have to admit, I'm not always 100% certain how to spell gauges. So it's useful that the wordplay... Well, no, in fact, I think at this point, the wordplay doesn't distinguish between GUA and GAU. So I've put in what I think is right, but I'm prepared for 2 down to begin with a U and correct me. I don't normally, as you might guess, have a lot of lack of confidence about spelling, but that's one of those words where I'm never 100% sure. 4 down, the definition was, or one of the definitions, I think it was a double definition clue, was chartist, and the answer's Smiles. Now, I'm not going to claim that I knew that Samuel Smiles was a member of the Chartism movement, but I have heard of the 19th century book Smiles' Self-Help. I don't know where I've heard of that. A long time ago, it used to come up reasonably regularly somehow, probably not just in Crosswords, but in actual printed matter. So I know that Smiles is a name, and I was happy enough to put it in. Then I've had trouble in the bottom left corner. I haven't been able to use either of those G's that I've got going into it. So I've had to put in Eton and Cynic at 22 down. It's worth pointing out that when a lot of people solved this puzzle in the first half of the day, 22 down had a completely different clue to a completely different word. And apparently the Times had made a mistake and printed, some sort of editorial changes had gone on, and the wrong word entirely had been clued. So I'm lucky that I came to this in the afternoon when the clue and the answer had been repaired. And it's a bit of a throwback to our Diogenes with Cynic. It was just a hidden for me, participating in diplomacy, nice philosophical type. It's a very straightforward clue. I don't know if they put in an easy clue to apologise to the people who'd struggled with it earlier in the day. 26 across, one of those very unusual words, includes incredibly an anagram of illegal, H for husband and sh, SH for keep quiet around it. Irish sticks, a fairly straightforward clue, and frankly from that and S at the start of 10 letters, I would have been able to write in shillelagh with the correct spelling without necessarily the help of the anagram letters. I know that Simon was a bit stunned by the word, enough that I think he's used some piece of music that mentions the word shillelagh in one of the site videos instead of our normal opening credits music. So I don't know why. I have some Irish connections, so I'm aware that shillelagh crops up in a certain amount of Irish folk music. So clearly this puzzle's going okay now. It was a bit hard to get started, but as usual, once you get some letters in the grid, things come together a lot better. Now 5 down, the long one, I certainly didn't do that at first. Sadly undone by limited provision of insurance policy. Well, by the time I've got these many letters in the grid, I can see that that's double indemnity. And undone by limited is a very surprising bit of anagram fodder. There's no A's in it. It somehow doesn't look like those are words that are definitely going to contribute letters instead of meanings to the clue. But that's what they did in this case. A lot easier at the top. We've had dog-eared from Doge, a red, then a homophone of grey tape. Then Van Gogh regularly is the letters A, G and G, which appear regularly in Van Gogh, so that led quite straightforwardly to aggro. We've got an anagram of Greece isn't, less the S to give energetic, and the whole puzzle is now finishing quite quickly, which is a relief after a slow start, and that often is the way. Once you start getting letters in the grid, things become a lot easier to move on to. I think we've got 15 across coming up soon. Troublemaker, which is so often imp, so that's quite straightforward. But having nothing, half-educated, loutish, well, impolite can just about be loutish, so that must be the answer. The nothing is O, so how is LIT half-educated? Well, it's half of the word literate, which, although we normally use it now to mean able to read and write, I guess originally was more often used to mean educated. And then finally, 2 down, pay the price, expressing no disagreement. Atone is the defined answer, but the wordplay leads to at one, quite a nice phrase, expressing no disagreement if you're at one with somebody. So that puzzle is done in just over 6 minutes, which is about my average, 6 minutes and 8 seconds. And we move straight on to today's Cryptic 26864. Happy to get one across in quickly, but it didn't quite lead on to the waterfall of down answers I was hoping. It was one rat, a despicable sort, in a film, pick. And that means, and about buccaneers was the definition, piratic, relating to pirates. So it wasn't until I finally tried 2 down that I started to get answers off that. It's just a hidden in apricot tart. You can find ricotta, not literally I hope, but the letters are hidden there. 3 down, an anagram, 2-hander, and worth remembering that the play Educating Rita was just a play for 2 actors, and although the film, I think, with Julie Walters and Michael Caine brought in some other actors, the play is what's being referred to there. One across, I had vaguely thought, even when it was P starting 6 letters of Pudsey, as somewhere in Yorkshire, but it took me quite a long time and all the extra letters to see that we were reversing yes and DUP to make Pudsey. Pudsey might be more familiar to viewers as Pudsey the Bear from the BBC telethons, but Children in Need and so on. But in this case, it's the town in West Yorkshire. I've written Jocasts in 5 across, but I do know that Oedipus's mother was called Jocasta, so I've corrected that. 6 down, a pain in the neck contracted when twisting around. 5 letters, a pain in the neck. I'm immediately thinking the answer must be crick, but I can't see how that could possibly work with contracted when twisting around. So I haven't been able to write it in, and by the time I get some letters to help, it becomes clear that although I do need the word crick, it's not the solution. I have to reverse a crick, contract it, take the last letter off, and then I get circa, and the definition in the clue is just the last word about, which is around, which is a very unusual bit of defining. Often you can get at home or something, and the only clue there is in, either at the beginning or end of the clue. The only definition there is in, either at the beginning or the end of the clue, and that's pretty hard. Now 13 down, cabinet member, so I'm immediately thinking minister. Brief, cabinet members, brief time in several dramatic episodes. And by the time I get a little bit of help with that and come back to it, I realise, and I put that in inverted commas, that it would be very clever to hide a T in mini-series, a series of dramatic episodes, to give ministries. Only what I hadn't realised is that's not how you spell ministries, which drops the E from minister, and that mini-series isn't, incredibly, the only 10-letter realisation of a series of dramatic episodes. So by the end of the puzzle, I have to correct that answer to ministerial, using the apostrophe S at the end of cabinet members, much more than I was expecting. And the series of dramatic episodes is mini-serial. So it's a very neat use. I'm not sure people would use the phrase mini-serial, whereas they would use mini-series, but it's a very neat repurposing of ministerial as T in mini-serial. It certainly fooled me for a while. Least robust rose, ultimately, that's letter E. Withers, that's dies. And if drenched means if you put it in the wet. So if you put E dies in wet, you get weediest, meaning least robust. So it's slightly indirect cluing there. You have to kind of work out what if drenched ? Means. And, I think it works very neatly, but it's not quite as straightforward. There we see me putting in the bogus spelling of ministries. And it's quite a while spent studying 27 across with the wrong letters in it and not knowing the answer before I figure it out. And I think that's because, ministries has been, I didn't really question to myself much whether it's a word or not. So it answered the wordplay so well, and it crosses with 4 letters already, and it's going to cross with a 5th shortly. And that's something that really gives you confidence it's right. So there is almost no part of my brain questioning whether I've got the right letters for 27 across. And with S something N something H something D as it becomes, all I can think of is synced. And the clue is scoffed when guided round a Spanish church. And that just doesn't lead to synced in any way. So I was, as I say, very confused, and eventually I just had to stop and try and effectively cold solve that clue to work out what it could be getting at without any provided letters. And guided then led me to LED, LED. And once I put that round, which is one of the ways of saying A in Spanish, and church for CH, then I finally realized that could be lunched, which explains the definition scoffed. So, and that finally brought me to the end of a third puzzle again, 6 minutes 20 after that, slight confusion there, and happy enough with that. It's a decent solve and very useful practice. These puzzles may be slightly easier than one would expect the final puzzles to be in a week and a half's time in the championship, but probably about the standard of the preliminaries, and I'd certainly be very happy to get them done in 17 or 18 minutes. That would enable anybody to qualify for the final. So useful practice, and thank you very much for watching as usual. It's been entertaining.